Hello guys, welcome back to Daily Kaylee, and I hope you enjoyed the Charles Manson episode. I hope you took a snack break, you've got all the popcorn and Halloween candy in the world, and you're ready to jump in to a extremely badass woman by the name of Elizabeth Bathory. Elizabeth Bathory lived from August 7th, 1560 to August 21st, 1614. She was a Hungarian noblewoman. Her family owned land in the Kingdom of Hungary, which is now not only Hungary, but Slovakia and Romania. She has been labeled the most prolific female murderer. Elizabeth and 4 collaborators are accused of torturing and killing hundreds of young girls and women between 1590 and 1610. The highest number of victims ever cited through her trial was 650. Elizabeth had a servant named Susanna. She was a young girl, and she testified at her trial, saying that Elizabeth held a private book where she wrote down how many victims that she had murdered, the dates, all of that. Despite all of this evidence and the insane number of people that she killed, her family was so important that she never faced execution. She was imprisoned in the Szeged Castle in Upper Hungary, which is now Slovakia. The stories of her sadistic murders are verified by the testimony of more than 300 witnesses and survivors, as well as physical evidence and the presence of horribly mutilated, dead, dying, and imprisoned girls, which were found at the time of her arrest. There are stories that describe Elizabeth as a vampire, saying that she bathed in the blood of virgins to retain her youth. She also inspired part of Bram Stoker's Dracula, which came out in 1897. Her story has inspired tons of folklore in Romania, and she lives in infamy. Some people call her Countess Dracula and the Blood Countess. If you've seen American Horror Story Hotel, I don't need to tell you what character she inspired. Elizabeth's family was inbred, as lots of royal families were, even to this day, I'm sure. As a kid, because of this, she suffered multiple seizures that were caused by epilepsy. She was diagnosed with falling sickness, and treatments included rubbing blood of a non-sufferer of epilepsy onto her lips. If you do not want to rub someone else's blood on your lips, they would also give you a mix of the non-sufferer's blood and a piece of their skull. This led to lots of speculation that the reason she killed these young women and bathed in their blood was that she was trying to cure her illness, which doesn't make it any better, but okay. A lot of witnesses say that her family taught her to be cruel. Whenever Elizabeth was young, she would witness these brutal punishments that were executed by her family's officers, and she was taught by family members Satanism and witchcraft. At the age of 13, Elizabeth allegedly gave birth to a little boy. This child is said to have been fathered by a peasant boy, and her son was given away to a local woman that was trusted by the family. The woman was paid for her actions, and the boy was taken away. By the age of 10, Elizabeth was engaged to a man by the name of Ferenc Nodesty, who was the son of a baron. It was a political arrangement, as it usually is. Elizabeth, her social standing was higher than that of her husband, though, so she refused to change her last name, and instead forced her husband to take the last name Bathory. They married when she was 15 and he was 19, and 4,500 people were invited to this wedding. Her husband's wedding gift to her was his house, which was the castle that I talked about earlier. This castle is also where all of her murders took place. In 1578, her husband Nodesty became the chief commander of the Hungarian troops, and they went to war against the Ottomans. While her husband was away at war, Elizabeth managed business affairs and the estates, including responsibility for the Hungarian and Slavic people, even providing them with medical care. During the war, she was also charged with the defense of her husband's estates, which were all on the way to Vienna. The threat was pretty significant because the village of Szeged had already been plundered by the Ottomans. There was also several instances when Elizabeth intervened on behalf of another woman, including a woman whose husband was captured by the Ottomans and a woman whose daughter was raped and impregnated. Elizabeth went on to have not only the secret child, but 5 other children that we know of. All of her children were cared for by governesses, not herself. And apparently that's exactly how she was treated as a child as well. Her husband died on January 4th, 1604, at the age of 48, and they had been married for 29 years before he died. Before he died, however, he entrusted his heirs and his widow to a man by the name of Georgi Thurzo, and this man would eventually lead the investigation into Elizabeth's crimes. Between 1602 and 1604 is when these rumors of Elizabeth reached the kingdom. A minister made complaints against her, publicly and at the court in Vienna. Because this man was respected, they did decide to investigate, but they took some time to respond to these complaints. It wasn't until 1610 that Thurzo was finally assigned to investigate. By 1610, in October of that year, they had collected 52 witness statements, and by 1611, they had collected testimony from more than 300 witnesses. According to these testimonies, her first victims were girls aged 10 to 14 years old. It is said that she began killing daughters of people that she viewed as lesser than her, peasants, common folk, and she said to her that they were sent to her by their parents to learn courtly etiquette. It was also said that she had kidnapped some of these kids. These testimonies described severe beatings, burning or mutilation of their hands, biting the flesh off of their faces, arms, and other body parts, freezing or starving to death, the use of needles, crazy forms of torture that were carried out all by Elizabeth. According to the Budapest City Archives, the girls were burned with hot tongs and then placed in freezing cold water. Some of them were also covered in honey and then had live ants dumped on them. Elizabeth was also suspected of cannibalism. Some witnesses named relatives they knew that died at the hands of Elizabeth. Others reported have seen traces of torture on dead bodies, some of which were buried in graveyards and others in unmarked locations. 2 court officials claimed to have personally witnessed the Countess torture and kill young servant girls. On December 30th, 1610, Elizabeth was arrested at her castle along with 4 of her servants who were accused of being her accomplices. According to a letter that Thurzo wrote to his wife, his unannounced visit found 1 dead girl and another living girl in the castle, but there is no evidence that they asked her what happened to her. When they arrived, Elizabeth was eating dinner, and apparently she was covered in blood. Her imprisonment was basically house arrest. These servants confessed that they saw these crimes, that they helped her commit these crimes under torture, which is not usually credible. The king hired these girls to testify against Elizabeth, and once they did, they were executed. Out of all of the evidence they have, there is no document to prove that anyone in the area confessed or complained that the Countess had killed anyone. She died at the age of 54 inside of the castle, where she remained for the rest of her life. And on the evening of August 20th, 1614, she signed her will, which left everything to her children, and she complained to her bodyguard that her hands were cold. She went to sleep and was found dead the following morning. The location of her body is unknown. And I think that is a very fitting end to the legend of the Romanian Countess. Thank you guys so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you thought it was as creepy and interesting as I do. I'll see you in a couple days, and we will continue the 13 Days of Halloween series. Bye, guys.